I'm Erik for Newsshooter.com, and welcome to the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K review. Woof, that's a mouthful. I sure wish it was just called maybe Pocket 4K. I think that's what I'm going to call it from now on. It's a lot easier. Now, the Pocket 4K is a really well-equipped camera. At $1,295, it also includes DaVinci Resolve Studio. Now, that's worth about $300, so that really makes this camera basically around $1,000, and it really is a bargain at that price. I don't know any other camera that shoots ProRes, all these flavors, including HQ, LT, 422, and Proxy, along with Cinema DNG. Now, soon it will have RAW, well, Blackmagic RAW, it will be added. Now, not now, but it will be soon. We don't really know when, but it is going to happen. Now, the camera itself, well, it's interesting. It doesn't have a viewfinder or an EVF, but it does have a pretty decent screen on the back. I found it to be a little problematic in certain situations. We'll definitely touch on that as well. So let's go ahead and jump in, take a look at all the features of the new Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. The body is made of a carbon composite material. It's very light and supposed to be pretty darn strong. It feels pretty good in the hand. In fact, it kind of feels, well, a little cheap, but maybe that's just because it is so light. On top of the Pocket 4K camera, you have function buttons. By default, button 1 is set to false color, button 2 is set to display LUT, and button 3 is set to frame guides. Above the function button, you have white balance, shutter, and ISO. And then on top of that, you have photo record as well as video record. Okay, let's move to the back of the camera. You have iris and focus buttons, as well as high frame rate, zoom, menu, and playback. Oh, and the cold shoe not included. The Pocket 4K has a touchscreen. Now, it works pretty well for focusing. One downside with the touchscreen is it does not work very well in bright sun. And here in San Diego, it's sunny a lot. Shooting outside was not easy. Looking at some of my test footage, I noticed a lot of shots that were out of focus. Manual focusing was a challenge. Having a touchscreen and going through the menu is almost exactly like it is on the Ursa Mini Pro. It's very easy. It's a simple camera to operate, and I like that. Now let's take a look at some of the inputs. A 3.5mm microphone input, headphone in, HDMI out, 12-volt power, USB-C, and mini XLR. The Pocket 4K has an active micro four thirds mount. The sensor is 18.96mm by 10mm. Having an active micro four thirds mount means you can use Lumix lenses that also are active. In other words, they have electronic contacts on the back, and you can control iris, focus, and have image stabilization working all with the Pocket 4K. The Metabones adapter is very popular for cameras like the GH5 for putting Canon EF lenses on a micro four thirds mount. The focus features are not working. Iris control and image stabilization all work fine, but for some reason, no focus control. So if I tap the screen, I won't get autofocus, and the autofocus button on the camera also doesn't work. I'm sure an update from Metabones will enable all these features. The touchscreen on the camera is actually pretty good. Unfortunately, it's hard to use in bright sunlight. Also, it's lacking an EVF that I really missed. The Pocket 4K has some impressive codecs, with Cinema DNG RAW 3.1 and 4.1, as well as ProRes 422 HQ, 422, LT, and Proxy. It records at Ultra HD up to 4K DCI from 2398 to 60p. Yep, 60p and Ultra HD as well as DCI. If you want to shoot at 120 frames per second, you're going to have to do so in HD windowed mode. I played around with it, and I'll tell you, it's quite impressive. I shot all this handheld in my backyard at night with a little bit of a fill light. I set the camera to 4000 ISO. Yeah, 4000 ISO. It really does look pretty good to me. You're seeing it in HD. This is what it would look like if I up-resed it. And I cleaned it up just a little bit with some denoiser. Not bad at all for a camera that costs a little over $1,000. Let's talk about Meteor recording options. For internal, you have an SD card slot as well as a CFast card slot. Now you can only record to one or the other, so you can't make a backup, say, to the SD card. Another really cool option, and this is one I did use a lot, was recording to an SSD drive. Angelbird and Samsung have fast enough drives that are approved to use. Now you just plug it into the USB-C and, well, I found my own creative way of mounting the drive to the camera since I didn't have, well, a proper mount. Angelbird has a nice match pack for the Pocket 4K. It includes a 512GB SSD to go, as well as a 256GB CFast card. It retails for $399. For power, the Pocket 4K uses LPE6 style batteries. It does come with one, but you better be prepared to get more, because I wasn't able to get more than 30 to 45 minutes of runtime from one battery. I highly recommend buying an OEM Canon battery. The LPE6N outperformed any of the third-party batteries that I tested, and that includes Blackmagic's. The door on the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K is kind of flimsy, but it is removable if you want to use an external battery. Now, I had a problem with one of my batteries. This was a third-party battery. It got stuck inside the chamber. The only way I was able to get it out is by using gaffer's tape. I pushed it on, made sure the surface was covered, and yanked it out. No damage was done, but it is a little strange. Now, I only had this problem with this one battery, but I know of others that have had the same issue. Another power-related issue is this shutdown thing. Now, it usually happens when the battery is running low. But in this example, I was still at like over 20%, and the camera was recording and just shut down. And it could actually go to about 4%. This is kind of frustrating, and it's not consistent with all batteries. I haven't lost any footage, or I might have lost maybe 10 frames at the end, but I haven't noticed. I still think it's not very acceptable and should be addressed. I mentioned external batteries earlier, and a good option is the PowerBase Edge from Core SWX. The nice thing about the Core SWX PowerBase Edge is that it mounts onto the camera itself. It has a quick release and can simply be mounted to the camera. You should definitely check out my full review on Newsshooter.com. With the PowerBase Edge, I was getting a little over 3 hours of runtime. One downside with using the battery on the bottom of the camera, with a heavier lens, you're going to get a little bit of movement. I had some issues shooting with a longer 70-200, and I got a little bit of wobble. So definitely know that. With shorter lenses, it wasn't a problem. To assist you in getting the proper exposure, the Pocket 4K uses a histogram, false color, and zebra stripes. What I feel is lacking is no waveform monitor. This is a video camera, not a hybrid camera, so I really wish that Blackmagic would have included a waveform monitor instead of a histogram. I also would have liked if the zebra stripes could go lower than 75 IRE. I like to use zebra stripes for nailing skin tone, and I generally like to be around 55 to 65%. I can only go to 75% on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. This is also true with the Ursa Mini Pro. The Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K has dual native ISO, and that is 400 and 3200 ISO. In theory, it's supposed to give you better low-light condition shooting as well as bright daylight shooting. But the real benefit is in low-light shooting. When set at 1250 ISO, it cleans up very nicely. The difference between 1250 ISO and 1000 ISO is, well, very different. The blacks are pushed down and the highlights are lifted. You'll lose some dynamic range, but you'll gain a much cleaner picture. If you want a cleaner image, 1250 ISO is a better choice than using 500 or 800 ISO. Here's a scene that I shot at 6400 ISO. I balanced the shot by bringing the shadows down and the highlights up, then added a little denoiser. The shot looks pretty good, very usable. Just for kicks, let's try the same technique with 25,600 ISO. If I had to do it, I think it'd be usable. What I do find impressive is the noise reduction in camera. I don't know how much is actually being applied, but it's not softening the image throughout the ISO range. As you can see in the camera bag in the back, it didn't lose any texture. The fabric looks, well, pretty good. Well, let's check out 16,000 ISO. Still looks pretty good. The Pocket Cinema camera has two audio inputs, one 3.5 and one mini XLR. Unfortunately, the 3.5mm input broke the first week I had it. A surprising feature that the Pocket 4K has is a locking mini XLR audio input. This is very cool. I didn't have one of the cables, so I found one online. They're not that common. Blackmagic makes one that has two cables in one kit. I don't know very many cameras, at least at $1,300, that has professional audio inputs like a mini XLR. Add that it also locks in place is a huge plus. After doing some testing, I decided to go ahead and use the setup with audio for a promo shoot. Well, here's a sample of the audio quality from the mini XLR.
Únete a Telemundo 20 este 13 de diciembre para Wishes in Flight. Los deseos son importantes. Ayuda a conceder un deseo. Acompáñanos este jueves para el evento de donativos Wishes in Flight.
Join NBC December 13 for Wishes in Flight. Join NBC this Thursday for Wishes in Flight. Wishes matter. Help grant a wish.
I've said this before, for $1,300, the camera looks pretty good, and having that mini XLR input is a big plus. But with that 3.5 input breaking, well, yeah, that's kind of a bummer. The Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K has a lovely image. It has nice detail, it's sharp. Color looks great. All around, I mean, the image is just really nice. The downside for me shooting outside is, well, there's no EVF. The screen works okay in the shade. Indoors, it's okay too. But outside, I struggled. A cool app that I use for my Ursa Mini Pro, called the Bluetooth Plus for Blackmagic, works with a Pocket Cinema Camera 4K as well. You can adjust off-speed frame rates, aperture, shutter angle, ISO, active card, power on and off, a whole bunch of cool stuff. One feature it has that I wish would work with the Ursa Mini Pro is a focus slide. You can manually adjust the focus with focus-by-wire lenses. Well, that wraps up this review of the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. I hope you learned a few things about the camera. I like the camera a lot, but I'll have to admit the one thing that worries me the most is dependability. When the 3.5mm audio input broke on me so early in the testing, I was a bit surprised, and it's concerning. And also, well, the battery issue, the shutdown thing is really kind of weird. Battery getting stuck in the body, that's a little strange, but I don't think a lot of people are going to experience this. It just depends on the third-party battery that you end up having. I highly recommend using those Canon LPE6N batteries. And if you're going to get the camera, just go ahead and buy like 5 of those batteries and don't use any other ones. This way, that shutdown issue will potentially be avoided. And the batteries tend to work more similarly because they're the same model and make. So you're going to have similar performance. You'll get to know when maybe this will happen, the shutdown. Now, Blackmagic does need to address this thing. Hopefully they will fix it in firmware. Now, as far as not having an EVF, that also kind of, well, it's kind of annoying to me because I do like having an EVF. I struggled a lot outside with the touch screen, but in the shade or in a studio or indoors, it was fine. It was fine. It's just, I really need an EVF. I'm used to it. I kept trying to put it to my face, you know. It's just muscle memory, I suppose. But all in all, the camera is a great deal. Comes with DaVinci Resolve Studio, $1,295. ProRes shooting, 120 frames per second in windowed mode, which looks really, really great. And the implementation of dual native ISO is super impressive. I've tested other cameras that have this type of technology, and noise reduction got a little aggressive on those higher ISOs. That's something I didn't see in the Pocket 4K, so that's a big deal because it cleans up nicely. And in 120 frames per second, even at in the sample shots, we're at 4000 ISO, and the detail was really quite good. And again, I just give credit to ProRes, because ProRes is a 10-bit 422 codec, and I'm shooting at 120 frames per second with just an excellent codec. So no skimping there. So you're going to start off with a really good image. And it looks really great. And it up-resed really nicely too, which, well, that's very handy if you have a 4K workflow and you want to shoot 120 frames per second. But all in all, yeah, it's a very interesting camera. At $1,295, you can practically buy two if you're worried about having dependability on set. But if they can address some of those issues, I think this camera is just going to be a winner. All right, well, that's it for me. I'm Erik Nancy with Newsshooter.com. Thanks for watching, and make sure to go by Newsshooter.com and check out all the content that we have for you.